This is Speaking of Writers on Capital Region Sunday. I'm Steve Richards. On a winter afternoon in upstate New York, George Clare comes home to find his wife murdered and his 3-year-old daughter alone. In a tight-knit college town, George immediately finds himself the target of the investigation. The question of his guilt and his wife's own secrets echo throughout this literary whodunit that quickly pivots into a whodunit. A tense, layered mystery, All Things Cease to Appear, showcases Elizabeth Brundage's skill at crafting an unforgettable noir tale about the people we think we know and the secrets they hide. Elizabeth Brundage has graduated from Hampshire College, attended the NYU Film School, was a screenwriting fellow at the American Film Institute in Los Angeles, and received an MFA as well as a James Michener Award from the University of Iowa Writers Workshop. She has taught at a variety of colleges and universities, most recently right here at Skidmore College, where she was visiting writer-in-residence, makes her home here in the Capital Region, and joins me now here on Speaking of Writers. Welcome to this program.
Thank you, Steve. It's great to be here.
So the idea for All Things Cease to Appear, where did that come from?
Well, I would have to say that it came from living in a series of old, very cranky houses with possible ghosts. And it also originated with reading an article in a newspaper about an actual murder that had occurred in an upstate New York town with these sorts of circumstances. And then I built the novel all around that actual crime. So it began with the crime, but I'm so much more interested in the why of these things, not the what. And so that was the genesis of it, though.
Now, where in the Capital Region is this loosely based on?
It's loosely based in an area of Columbia County, I would say, around the Chatham area, which is sort of in the center of, it's about, I guess, close to 30 miles from Albany, south towards the New York area.
This primary character, George Clare, how did you create this character?
Well, I wanted to write a story. I knew I was beginning with this crime that had actually happened, and that fascinated me because the woman is killed with her daughter running around the house. And at the time that I first heard about this case, it was in the early 90s, and I had 2 little girls. And so at the time, I thought, oh my God, I can't imagine what that must have been like. And I was so fascinated with that crime because there were no prints left in the house. They thought it was the husband, but they couldn't prove it. And so I really wanted to explore that situation, but not as a police procedural, but as a more psychological investigation, sort of along the lines of In Cold Blood, Capote's book. So I began with that. And George Clare came to me. I was very interested in writing about the Hudson River Valley. This region is absolutely, as you know, so beautiful.
Yes.
And the landscape here is really characteristic of a particular kind of wilderness beauty that was captured, obviously, in the Hudson River School by the Hudson River School painters like George Inness. So I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to write about an art historian? And so that's how I began to explore this character of George Clare, who is actually a very deeply troubled guy, a very dark personality. Somebody described him as having a dark soul, and I think that's really true, And so as I began to explore, I decided he would be an expert on George Inness, one of my favorite painters from the Hudson River School. And so when I started to explore George Inness, the painter, I realized that he was not only like most of the Hudson River School painters, very captivated and very interested in nature and trying to express a kind of spirituality through nature. But he was also a Swedenborgian, and you probably never even heard of Swedenborg. I had never heard of him. He was an 18th century Swedish philosopher, and he believed very strongly in the presence of heaven and hell, and very strongly believed in God, and of course, and Innes really prescribed to this kind of, spiritual rubric that he used in his painting. And I thought, wow, this is a great way for me to kind of look at all these very interesting questions about life and death and ghosts and, how we behave towards one another as people and all of these big questions. So that became a great theme. So that's how I sort of evolved into George Clare's character.
The book is All Things Cease to Appear, Elizabeth Brundage. The title, where did that come from? That's
actually a quote by George Innes. And he was really interested, the painter, George Innes, was really interested in the composition of a painting and how all parts have a certain all parts of the painting have a certain equal importance. And there's a scene where George Clare, the character, is driving in the car, and he is in a particularly odd frame of mind, a sort of troubled frame of mind. And it's twilight hour where the light it's just before dusk, and the light is very strange at that time. And so he comments that the horizon is sort of lost, so that the entire composition is kind of the edges of things are sort of lost, and that's a big part of the way George Innes painted, which I won't go into too much now. But so George makes the comment in his mind. He's thinking about Innes, who said that the perfect composition is when all things seem to kind of disappear, where it's the painting becomes less about what the painting is about, and more about how it makes the viewer feel and takes the viewer to a kind of spiritual place, another place outside of the realm of the ordinary and what we see as a usual, ordinary things, basically. Like, it's not the tree, but it's not the details of a leaf, but the sense of what the leaf is doing as it blows in the wind. So it sort of captivates the viewer. And I thought a lot about that when I was writing this book, which goes back to addressing this idea that it's not a story about a murder, but about why the murder might have occurred. So really looking deeper and deeper underneath that situation, that event that happened, and to try to discover something a little different about the motives that people have.
This book, All Things Cease to Appear, is your fourth book.
Yes.
How did you become a writer? And part two to that is, how did you end up here in the Capital Region?
Well, I became a writer, I guess I was about 10 years old when I decided I wanted to be a writer. I had this stack of yellow those note papers, the lined notebooks. And I used to write all kinds of stories. And so I love the idea of writing. I love the idea of storytelling at a very young age and solving problems on the page, problems that I couldn't understand necessarily as a young kid growing up, but I could work them out in storytelling. And I'm still doing the same thing. I don't think I've changed that much since my 10-year-old self when I was Lizzie. But I love to write, and I feel like it's a great privilege to be able to do this. I'm really happy. It brings me a lot of joy. There's nothing that compares to when you're really into the world. You begin the novel and you think an awful lot about the characters who are going to inhabit this world. And then all of a sudden you're just completely in that place. And it's when that can happen, you know that you're onto something. You know that the story is...
How hard is it to get to that place and get into that mode?
It really does take a while. I wrestled with this book, it took me a long time to write this book. I would say at least 5 years. And I think the reason was that I wasn't really sure. I was waiting for those characters to come to me. It sounds a little indulgent to say this, but it's really true that they're on your mind all the time. So as a writer, you're constantly working, which is good and bad. The people are always with you. And then once you finally get the story told and you're satisfied that you've done a good job with it, it's like they can go now. It's like over with. It's kind of a crazy thing.
And time to move on then?
Time to move on to something else. And then new characters, are all too willing to volunteer. So it's really interesting. It's an interesting line of work. I never imagined that I would actually be doing this, I think, when I was much younger, except that I loved to write. But I started as a poet, wanting to write poetry and really being interested in words and language. And I studied poetry in college, and then I began to get interested in film because I love the idea of using images to tell a story. And that led me, I was living actually overseas. I had been living in Israel for a while. My husband was studying medicine there, and I realized I didn't have a computer. I only had a pen and a piece of paper, and I couldn't do anything else but go back to the page, the simple page. And so that's what I did, and that's how I found my way into fiction, and I'm glad I did.
In our remaining moments here with Elizabeth Brundage, her new one, All Things Cease to Appear, is out now. I do want to mention that you are going to be in the area appearing.
Yes. I hope you come out and see me. It'd be really fun to see you.
Here are the upcoming dates. Saturday, March 12th at 5 p.m. That's at the Great Bookstore, the Book House of Stuyvesant Plaza on Western. On Sunday, March 13th, the very next day at 4 p.m., another terrific bookstore, Northshire Books, Saratoga Springs. And then on Saturday, March 19th at 3 p.m., that's at Barnes & Noble in Colony Center.
Yes. So come out and check out the book, and I'd love to meet you if you can come over to the bookstores, and we'll get to know each other. Do
you have a website?
I have a website. It's elizabethbrundage.com. And there's a lot of information on there about the book, about this book and my other books. And check it out.
You all over social media, too?
I'm not as good at that. I'm going to reveal my prehistoric age here. But I'm not as good at that as I would hope. I'm doing Instagram. That's a joy because it's just, it's so interesting. It's gotten me to really open my eyes and look at what's around us. It sounds so silly, but it's true. The strangest things can be make very interesting photographs. So,
what would you like readers to take away from this book?
This book really means a lot to me. I think it's less about a murder. It's less a thriller, although it's a dark story, than it is about people dealing with loss, and the sad things that often happen to us that we have to move on from. And so it's about that. It's about three brothers who are very close. There's a real sense of closeness between them. It's about a marriage that's coming apart and a woman who is trying to do the right thing, but it leads her to her death, which is, very sad. And it's about the beauty of this region, upstate New York. It's about the painters who put us on the map, put America on the map as a great and fascinating wilderness. It's about a lot of different things. It's about friendship between two women, and the academic world.
Speaking of the academic world, are you still teaching at Skidmore?
I'm not teaching at Skidmore. I had a great 3 years there, and I really enjoyed it, and there's fabulous people in the department there, all wonderful writers themselves, and I learned a lot there. It really got me back into taking my time with writing and trusting my instincts, not trying to write to sell something, but to really find my way back into what I loved about words and storytelling.
Do you have a special place where you write?
I had an office. We did move, so I'm in a temporary situation right now, but I'm hoping to create a new place to write. Everybody, of course, needs a room of their own, as Virginia Woolf said. And I I create whatever space I can. I try to create the right sort of mood and the Zen vibe so that I can get my work done and feel comfortable there.
What do you like to read? And what are you reading now?
Right now, I'm reading an interesting novel called The Vegetarian. I read a lot of all different kinds of things. Living writers, a lot of dead writers. I hate to say that, but I read a lot of poetry. I usually read at least 3 books at once. I sort of, it's like a tasting for me. I like to read a little of this and that. And sometimes I'll think of a book that, this person did such a good job. Yeah. This is what I want to try to do. And I'll seek that writer out and study them for a little bit.
Is there one book you keep coming back to over and over again?
There's a book that I love. I've always loved. It's called Light Years by James Salter. It's just my most favorite book for some reason. It just, he in a single sentence can really evoke just the mood of a place. And he's a very sensual writer. So I would say, unfortunately, he passed away, but I would say he's definitely one of my favorite writers. I love the Russian novelists. I've been reading Anna Karenina recently. Let's see, what else? There's just so many great writers out there. There's so many to love that it's impossible to even, Now,
as part of your process, do you outline or you let the story unfold as you're writing it?
I have a general idea where I'm going. It's sort of like somebody has told me the directions. I don't have a map with me, but it's sort of like that idea that you get in the car and you just start driving. You have a sense of where you're going, but you don't know all the names of the streets, put it that way. You find your way, and then something will happen. I think that's the real fun of writing, is when something surprises you. And I used to talk about this with my students, that when you get stuck, just imagine somebody pulling up the driveway and coming to your door, and who is that person and what do they want? And so right within that sort of thinking, a new character can be born. It's very easy to find these people. They're very willing, so that's a real excitement of writing, not really knowing and wanting to discover as you go. I think that's what keeps writers engaged in the work.
All right, bonus question here. You're having a literary dinner. What 3 authors, alive or deceased, would be at that dinner?
Oh, my God, that's really tough. Oh, Dostoevsky. I would have to have him there. I guess I would have Nabokov. I think he would be great. I'd love to talk to him. You've got me stumped. I mean, I love a lot of women writers. I'm trying to think of the
it's
one.
Hard to narrow it down.
I guess I'd love to have dinner with Marilyn Robinson. Somebody I'd really be fascinated to talk to.
And what is next for you in your writing?
Next, I'm working on something right now, and I'm in those early stages. It's like being a little bit afflicted with a virus, and you're starting to come down with the symptoms. So that's where I'm at. It's, I can't really talk about it, but it is also set in this area, more in Cohoes and Menands and Troy and that sort of section of town. I find it really interesting. The old buildings there are pretty fascinating.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they are. Yes. But she's Elizabeth Brundage. The book is All Things Cease to Appear Again, appearing in the area, too. Saturday, March 12th, Bookhouse Stuyvesant Plaza on Western. The 13th at Northshire Books in Saratoga Springs. And then on Saturday, March 19th at Barnes & Noble at Colony Center. Capital Region writer. We love to have Capital Region writers on this program. Elizabeth Brundage, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
And this is Speaking of Writers, and that is Capital Region Sunday, a production of Town Square Media Albany. For this week, we are back again next week with another edition. I'm Steve Richards.